Um, so that speaking of icon status and speaking of kind of the way we view ourselves and the way we view consumption, especially, Yayoi Kusama is the next artist I'm going to talk about. I don't even know how much time I have. Let me check the time. 1:24. This will probably be the last one for today. So this is called Infinity Garden, and it's these mirrored balls, right? And she created this for the first time in 1966, and there's a whole story about it. But first, let me tell you who Yayoi Kusama is. She's this really interesting lady. She was born in 1929 in Japan, and she's just been super eccentric for her entire life. She's been living in a mental health facility in Tokyo by choice, and she's very, very famous. In the late 50s, she came to New York from Japan and immediately kind of got involved with the art scene there and Andy Warhol and the abstract expressionists. And she just, came to America to like make art and meet other artists. And then, so the Venice Biennial is when she became famous. Every year in Venice, there's this huge art show called the Venice Biennial. In 1966, she went there with these huge mirrored, at the time they were plastic. She had 1,500 of them, and she set them up on a lawn outside of the Venice Biennial, and she was not invited. She just showed up with them, okay? So she, somehow got funding to create all these mirror balls, and she had a sign under them. She had a sign above them that said, "Your Narcissism for sale," and she sold them for what is about $2. And people would come up, and when you look at it, because of the curve of the ball and the reflective quality of it, you basically only see yourself, when you look into it. And people would buy them, and they eventually shut her down because she was not sanctioned by the organizers of the biennial. And she really got a lot of fame by doing that. And so, she's making a commentary about the art show. Like, she came as kind of an outsider, and people spent insane amounts of money on artworks at the Venice Biennial, and so the fact that she's selling these balls for $2 each, and it's basically just a reflection of yourself, it's like a very sort of poignant comment about how commercialized the Venice Biennial was, and also how we're sort of obsessed with ourselves, and why would you want to spend all this money when you can just have your own image in a giant ball? So that's kind of how she became famous. But then she started later on. She started making them out of steel, and now people spend thousands and thousands of dollars for one of the Narcissus garden balls. And so it's kind of ironic that it's turned into this highly desirable item. It's kind of got flipped on its head. But the installation has been moved around. So it's been in various locations in New York, and sometimes it's outside and sometimes it's inside. If you guys don't know, the original story of Narcissus, it's a Greek myth, and it's about this beautiful young man who was so in love with his own image, he just sat in front of a still pond, for hours and hours and days, and just gazed at his own reflection, and he gazed at himself for so long that he turned into the Narcissus flower, which is like a real flower. And so when you put him into water, it kind of references the original context of the story. But a lot of it is about interacting with the environment. They're mirror balls, and when they're in nature, they're sort of reflecting nature. If they're in, an urban setting, then they're reflecting and magnifying, the people around that are looking at it. So the meaning of a mirror is very, deep, I guess, in her work. And so the idea of, taking a reflection and what does it mean to individuals. So Yayoi Kusama, she's really interesting. She has a, we never made it to the Broad, but she has a permanent installation at the Broad in downtown LA, and you guys have to see it. It's called the Infinity Room, and it's this room that's just mirrors. It's just 4 walls with mirrors, and then the lights are out, and then there's these little twinkling lights on the floor. And so when you walk in, you just see the lights reflected into space because the mirrors reflect off of each other. And it looks like you're in space because of the reflections of the mirrors. You can't go in there when you're in a school group, but if you go on your own, you can make a reservation, because sometimes, depending on when you go, there's really long lines to get in and see the Infinity Room. But you got to go see it because it's really cool. She does a lot of cool things with mirrors, and she does a lot of things with space and installation too. Like she has this one installation. It's like a totally blank white room. It's a big room, and it's got like plain white furniture. Everything's plain white. And over the course of the installation, she gives all the visitors like a little packet of like little dot stickers. You go in and you put stickers wherever you want, you know. And after the installation's been up for a while, then the stickers like cover everything. And she's just a really cool conceptual artist. But anyways, she's associated with this term called happenings. And happenings were like performance art that happened. They started, calling it that in the late 1950s. But performance art is something that's planned, but it's time specific. It's kind of set up for the viewer to interact with it and have audience participation. Like, for example, the Narcissus garden was originally meant for people to come up and buy them from her. And she was like wearing a kimono and looked very exotic. And so she kind of added to that sense of like mystery, like, ooh, I have this magical ball where I can see myself, and this magical lady from Japan sent it from me. So it's kind of meant to have this sort of like mysterious otherness to it. But a happening can be a lot of things. And if I wish we had more time to look at performance art, because there's some really fascinating performance artists. If you really want to look into it yourself, I highly recommend this artist named Marina Abramovich. She's alive now. She's contemporary, and there's a great HBO called The Artist is Present, all about her life and work. She did this really long performance art piece where she sat at a table in this museum in New York City, and you could come and sit at the table, and like she would look into your eyes for 5 minutes, and like it turned into this huge like event, that everybody wanted to take part of, and it kind of raised her to this like superstar status because everybody wanted to spend 5 minutes at this table with her, even though you couldn't talk to her, you couldn't do anything about it, you couldn't touch her, you couldn't interact with her in any way, and all these crazy people came out of the woodwork, and the whole point of it was for her to like sit at the table and like stare into your soul and look into your eyes for 5 minutes. It sounds weird, but it's really fascinating. So if you have a chance to watch The Artist is Present, I highly recommend it. Any questions about Yayoi Kusama and the Narcissus Garden? Yeah, you have 2 mirrors. I'm good. Yeah, I mean, some people really are about looking at themselves, and there's a lot of, as you guys know, probably more now than ever, there's a lot of, narcissism and sort of kind of obsession with self-image. So Yayoi Kusama is really interesting for that.